Hello, welcome to the video. Spinning a wheel again today, talking about whatever team it lands on. So let's see who we get first. This is looking like it's going to be the Chicago Bulls. All right, so the Bulls are 9-14 right now at the 12th spot in the Eastern Conference. So off to, I think, a little bit worse of a start than how their season is going to go overall. I'm pretty sure I had them predicted for 42 wins, I want to say, 42-40 record. So maybe they'll be a little bit lower than that, but I still wouldn't be surprised, I guess, if they end up somewhere around there, especially if Lonzo comes back at all this season, which now that I'm saying that out loud, I can't remember if his injury is for sure going to be the whole season or not. Don't quite remember, but yeah, if at any point they have a fully healthy team, then I think they'll be winning more games. But yeah, honestly, I think what they need to upgrade is probably that Vucevic spot, the guy in the middle. You know, he might even be playing well at this point in this season. I know that he didn't start off at least the first few weeks super well, at least I don't think. But, you know, at this point, I just don't know if he's really adding all that much on offense to make it worth it for what he takes away from you on the defensive end. And that's not to say that he's like just overall a terrible defender or something like that. It's just more that the position he's playing is the most important position in the defense. And even when you're looking at like what makes him good on defense, like the positives that he does bring to that end of the floor, none of them are really in the mold of what that center role is supposed to give you on the defensive end. So, you know, you still have that pretty big void for like just the rim protection part of the defense, which coming from a Nuggets fan, like we have that same problem. That is definitely the main issue with our defense. And yeah, it's kind of a debate. Like you could have the argument of whether or not that's really to blame on Jokic or Vucevic in the Bulls' case, because it's not impossible to get rim protection on your team while having them on the floor as well. But them being on the floor definitely makes it harder. It definitely limits your options there in terms of getting another rim protector, because the other rim protector that you add is probably going to have to be somebody more in the Giannis or Mobley or Jaren Jackson Jr. maybe. Bam Adebayo, he's another one. That type of role where they can just kind of blend in into any part of your defense, switch onto the perimeter and defend the rim at like at least an approximation of what your average NBA team's best rim protector will do. You know, that middle of the defense makes it harder just a little bit, just because, you know, they can't necessarily hang out in the paint and be the rim deterrent. They kind of have to help off ball and rotate and kind of play a lot of the different positions on the floor at the same time. So it's a rare type of player to come across or to find, and it would be easier if you could just go with somebody who can guard the traditional bigs and play drop coverage in the pick and roll and be the rim protector, like a Brook Lopez or a Miles Turner or Rudy Gobert, lots of different guys, and just have them be your rim protector, and then, you know, build your offense in a different way without Jokic. So, you know, there's an argument to be had there, whether it's better to just build around other pieces and trade, I guess, Jokic for value in other areas to try to build a different team. I'm not really of that opinion, though. I just think what Jokic brings on the offensive end of the floor especially is just unparalleled, and I really do think that the Nuggets' best chance at winning a title is definitely building around him. There's not a doubt in my mind. But when you're talking about with a team like the Bulls, a player like Nikola Vucevic, you know, he's not really the center of your team, not like the number one option, you know, is what I mean by that. He becomes, I guess, a bit more expendable. But, you know, like I was saying, I think Jokic and Vucevic can both be positive contributors on the defensive end in the right system when you just build around them correctly to highlight and showcase their strengths on that end and cover up their weaknesses, which I like I said, I don't think is impossible. But I don't think I've really seen it done before. I can't totally think of a great example or comparison of something like that on the defensive end being done, other than kind of with Brooklyn. But the difference is Brook Lopez is not like Jokic on the defensive end. They're very different players. Brook Lopez is a pretty traditional rim protector. How they've built around Brook Lopez, though, on the defensive end is putting other guys out there that can switch really well and rotate over, like Giannis especially, to kind of be the secondary rim protector and, you know, whatever he needs to do on the floor. You know, the personnel they have there in Milwaukee really just enhances Brook Lopez's strength on the defensive end, which is defending in that drop coverage. So, you know, their perimeter players can fight over screens very well, especially like Drew Holiday, so they can stick to the ball handler, allow Brook Lopez to drop back in the paint and protect anything that comes to the rim. And if teams, you know, attempt to get a power play out of that scenario because they're, you know, there's like a 2-on-1 or something, they try to kick it out to the open man. The Bucks are very good at recovering defensively and getting out to those open guys on the perimeter and playing help defense just really well. So So, the thing with Jokic and Vucevic is they're not crazy mobile on the perimeter. So, you might want to try to play them and drop. But then the thing is, they're also not super vertical threats. They're not going to have great outcomes all the time defending at the rim. And you also don't want them to, because you don't want them to be in foul trouble for sure, is another thing. Because of what especially Jokic does for you on the offensive end, he's just very vital there. So in Jokic's case, you can bring him up to the level of the screen so he can get his hands in passing lanes and do what he does well there. But like I said, the thing that would really help is having somebody on the backside of the defense while he's doing that, while he's up at the level of the screen, getting the passing lanes. You have somebody behind him kind of being able to rotate over on the weak side and defend the rim at least a passable level. I think we try to do that to a certain extent with Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. We're both not bad in that role, but they definitely have their limitations, seeing that they're wings, they're not really bigs, But yeah, that's my thoughts. Probably spent way too much time there on talking not really about the Bulls. But I kind of feel bad for Bulls fans, though, just because they just started getting hope in their franchise the last couple of years now, especially last season. And now it's looking kind of bleak again pretty quick, just because the rest of the East has gotten really good and they've been struggling with injuries, and they have, these roster fit issues that probably aren't going to get better with time, keeping these same players. And they traded a lot of their assets and stuff to get this current roster that they have. So, definitely not over for Bulls fans. Like, not saying you can't be a good team again in the near future, but there's definitely cause for concern, I guess, there. All right, so let's go on to the next team. Let's see which one we get. And it looks like it's landing on wow, that's really close. The Portland Trail Blazers. I think I talked about them in the last video, so I think it's a little bit too early to say something about them again. But if it lands on a team that I have talked about, but it's been a little while, I have another thought on, I think I'll probably stop and say something about it. But in the meantime, let's find a new team to discuss. And yes, it is finally the Utah Jazz. So it's been a long time coming for this one, and they're 14-12 now, the 9 seed in the Western Conference. So it's nowhere near the same level of relevancy that it would have been if I would have talked about them at the beginning of the season. Because for a while they were the 1st seed in the West. I think they were like 10-2, I want to say. So they've definitely been struggling as of late. Maybe they weren't 10-2. I think that sounds a little too crazy. They were maybe like 10-3, 10-4, something like that. But anyways, so coming into the season, back in the offseason actually, when the Jazz traded away Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, got all these role players and draft picks in exchange for them, it was pretty obvious what they were doing. They're just blowing it all up, not really trying to win any games this year. I still think that's true. It seems like people have kind of acted like that viewpoint was incorrect now, like they've proven that wasn't the truth. But I genuinely don't believe that Danny Ainge was thinking that he was putting together a winning roster this season. I don't believe that for a second. But I also don't think he's necessarily upset with this either. At least, I don't know. My viewpoint, if I were him, I don't think I would be that upset, just because you're finding a lot of value in a lot of these players that is newfound value, like especially Lauri Markkanen. Just to talk about him for a second, back in the offseason when he was playing in Eurobasket for his home country of Finland, he was balling out, showing new sides of himself, being like the number one option and ball handler, shot creator on his national team. And people were making jokes and saying that, this is going to be him on the Jazz this season. And, not all of them were jokes either. I think there were quite a few people saying, just look out for Lauri Markkanen. He's going to be a whole different player here in Utah. And I don't know. I didn't really think much when I saw those things. I kind of was just like, probably not, just because I'm used to seeing people ball out for their national teams and look like completely different players than they are in the NBA. And I've felt that before, seeing like, Evan Fournier for France or Jetty Osman for Turkey in certain games, and Rudy Hernandez on the Spanish national team back in the day. Like, I remember watching those guys and thinking like, whoa, what if they're going to start playing like this in the NBA? And they never really do. Eurobasket and the FIBA games are it's a really nice, interesting environment to showcase like different sides of players, because I think it's pretty much impossible, or maybe not impossible, but extremely difficult to replicate that in the NBA, because number one, the rules, style of play just has to be a little bit different, being that it's a different brand of basketball. But also these teams are formed of players that have been playing together and been very familiar with each other for years now. Like, their entire basketball lives have been playing with each other to a certain extent. So, they have long-standing philosophies and chemistry and plays and all these kinds of things that definitely have a lot of value, especially in one-off game scenarios instead of playing series like how you do in the NBA. But what we have seen though from Lauri Markkanen on the Jazz this year is very similar to at least what I saw from him from the FIBA highlights. Well, not FIBA, but Eurobasket. He's playing both as the ball handler and as the roller in different cases in the pick and roll scenario. He's stretching the floor like he has in previous years, but it's just really the on-ball factor is the main thing. And him continuing to look really good on the defensive side of the ball, which is still feeling like a little bit of a revelation to me. It was something that I noticed for the first time last season when he was with Cleveland, how actually solid of a defender this guy is. And I was just not expecting that at all. We've seen a continuation of that, I guess. And yeah, so he's been interesting as kind of like, he's a number one option, but he's not like the same level of, he doesn't get the same type of usage, I would say, as most number one options do, because the Jazz really share the ball a lot, especially at the beginning of the season when they were up there in the standings. They were leading the league in assists per game. And they just have really solid players. There's just lots of solid NBA players on their team. Kind of reminds me of the start that the Wizards got off to last year. Like I would have said at the beginning of the season, I didn't think that they would end up in the top 4 seeds, even after they destroyed the Nuggets game 1. I always probably would have told you if you asked me where I thought they would end up. I thought they would probably end up at best in the play-in range, like the 7 to 10 area is probably their ceiling. So, and that's what I kind of feel now too. But just to highlight some other players on that team though, really quick, and the coach, Will Hardy, he's been a really good coach. I noticed that from game 1 against the Nuggets. That game was a weird experience. Came into it thinking that we were going to win big. I did have a little bit of a worry in the back of my mind just because it happens every once in a while. I've watched just about every Nuggets game the past 3 or 4 years now. I just wanted to fact check myself really quick where I said the last 3 or 4 years now. I started becoming, I've always been a Nuggets fan, but in my more adult life, I guess, where I started, got a subscription to League Pass and started following them literally every single game and became just that level of a fan, I guess. That started the 17-18 season at the very beginning of that. So this is actually the 6th season now, which just feels really weird, but just wanted to point that out. Yeah, like I was saying, I watch a lot of Nuggets games, so sometimes it does happen where we just get blown out. I think it probably happens a certain extent to every team, but I don't know. It feels like every once in a while, the Nuggets, if it's a team that we're expected to just destroy, we at least struggle with them, is how it feels like it usually goes. And then we dominate in games that not necessarily expected to as much. But yeah, I noticed right away that, Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson, both still on the roster. I didn't really think they would be coming into the year because, I don't know, I guess I was viewing it through the lens of roster building more so than thinking about how the players on the floor were going to go about it and how, new coaching staff was going to go about it. And it looks like Will Hardy has really gotten through to this group of guys that they all seem to get along well. They all seem to just play off each other really well, play really unselfish. And especially at the beginning of this year when they were winning so many games against good teams, they were just so fired up, so fun to watch. I actually watched probably, the Jazz have definitely been the second most watched team for me this year. And I've been cheering for them every game they've played, except for the Nuggets ones. But, they have fun guys on there that I wish the Nuggets had still, especially Jared Vanderbilt, Malik Beasley. I really liked him while he was with the Nuggets as well. Side note on that, with the Vanderbilt thing, I can't remember what podcast it was, but I was listening to a podcast recently where they were talking about the Jazz, and I think it was Thinking Basketball actually, but somebody said something about just, the guys on their team, how some of them could be really good role players and be really important on championship contending teams this year. And one guy was like, I just want to live in a world where Jared Vanderbilt is playing for the Nuggets. And he kind of said the Nuggets in a way of not necessarily their team specifically, but he just was trying to think of a good team that he could fit on, and that was one that he thought of. It didn't sound like he had any idea that Jared Vanderbilt was upon the Nuggets once upon a time, and even if he did know, he wasn't thinking about it in that moment. But yeah, just as soon as I heard that, I was like, wow, yep. And I felt that way when we traded him. But defending that deal, though, we had to get rid of some guys because we had too many good young players that we were going to have to pay. And so Tim Connolly, Nuggets GM, didn't want to give players up for nothing and just let them walk in the offseason. So he decided to trade them for a little bit of draft capital, I think, and then some other role players to see if, maybe they can work out. None of them really did, though. I think Keita Bates-Diop was one of them, and we moved on from him pretty quickly. I think Gerald Green was salary filler in that deal, which is kind of losing the guys for nothing. But, because Gerald Green definitely did not ever suit up for the Nuggets. I don't think so, at least. I don't remember that. I'm pretty positive he never even suited up. I'm pretty sure we waived him fairly early on. But yeah, Vanderbilt, kind of what I was just talking about before with Giannis and Bam and, just that type of defender that rotates all over the place. Mobley, the roaming, switchable, rim protecting defender all in one. Vanderbilt is that type of defender as well. And so, theoretically, he could be on the Nuggets right now, playing a very huge role. Just doesn't work out that way all the time. I wanted to see many more minutes from him while he was here that he didn't end up getting. But I don't know. It does get a little frustrating seeing a lot of the young players that Denver gives up on end up just being so good once they finally get an opportunity somewhere and gets to a team where they're actually playing them, like Bol Bol with the Magic now. I felt like I was the only Nuggets fan alive that was confused at why we gave him up for basically nothing. A lot of people gave up on him really quick here in Denver. And I don't know. Every time I saw him out there on the floor with Jokic at the same time, I was like, this is amazing. Like, you know, he wasn't faultless and didn't have his clear blemishes, especially just as a young player. Like, he definitely had those. But letting time and experience iron a lot of those things out and then see what you got then, like, it seemed like the potential for what that pairing could be was just, it was so fun. And I kind of wish we had more roster spots, more minutes to go around, you know? Okay, I need to stop talking about the Nuggets and keep talking about the Utah Jazz. But their coach, Will Hardy, was really good in that first game, just noticing little things that he was doing, both offensively and defensively. For a while there in that game, the Nuggets kept going to Jamal in the pick and roll, trying to get a switch to get, you know, a big man guarding him so he could, you know, have a more favorable matchup, trying to get past him on the dribble. But the Jazz kept doing this thing where they would start off with certain guys defending certain players, like they intentionally didn't want to end there. You know, they were planning on a switch coming. But, you know, I don't think it was as simple as that, because obviously if you recognize that as the Nuggets, then just don't go to the pick and roll. Just have Jamal take whoever is guarding him off the dribble then. But they're smart with it. The person originally defending Jamal isn't somebody that he can beat off the dribble, but he's also somebody that could switch onto a big pretty well, like a Jared Vanderbilt. And they would do these, you know, like triple switches or kind of be in ambiguous, like almost like guarding in a zone. It's like certain players would be more in a zone until the pick happened, and they would attach to the guys that are the most favorable matchups for them. So, you know, just little things like that I would notice. I really liked what I saw from Walker Kessler in the first several games. It's been a while since I've watched the Jazz, like the entirety of games, so I haven't seen a lot of Walker Kessler minutes. I've just seen crunch time minutes from them. But from what I have seen from him, he's looked really good. You know, he's just super tall and long, really good rim protector. But, you know, the interesting part about this Jazz team, though, is that they can go one of two ways at this point. Like, they have so many picks, they could just wait it out and continue to build through the draft. But also this new opportunity that's arising because, like, they actually have a pretty decent team right now with a decent record and, like, a lot of assets to throw around. Could the Jazz just put a few of those picks together and a couple of those contracts together and go get Kevin Durant and add Kevin Durant to this lineup of really solid players and maybe go and try to compete for the championship? Like, that would be a very interesting twist to this NBA season. And yeah, I just think the Jazz are fun. Like, one of the main points that I feel like can illustrate what I'm saying about how much better the team is compared to where I thought they would be, or like how good everybody was expecting to be coming into the year. Like, me and very many other people were predicting that Colin Sexton was going to be like the focal point of this offense and averaging like 30 points a game and, you know, doing all that stuff. And he so far this season has been coming in off the bench and playing like not even like a lot of minutes off the bench. I don't think, like, he's been their sixth man, I'm pretty sure, but it's not like a Lou Williams type of sixth man, you know, who gets starter level minutes. Yeah, he's been getting 24 minutes a game. So, you know, that's like a traditional sixth man amount of minutes, probably one of your first guys off the bench. That's the guy that we thought was going to be taking the majority of this team's shots, and he's coming off the bench. So yeah, there you have it. I think that will be enough for this video. Thanks for watching. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I need a better catchphrase.